All right. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to see you all here. If this is the first time that you're coming to one of our events, my name is Brooke Monahan. I am the host of all of these events. I'm the founder of Fruition Growth Network. I run all of the coaching programs that we have in Fruition. And so I'm really glad to see you here. I want to let you know about a few things that are available to you here in Fruition, because now that you have found us, you may as well take advantage of everything that we have available to you. We have a couple of co-workings coming up. The one is going to be on Friday, this coming Friday on the 1st. We also have another one happening on Monday, the 18th. So if you are feeling like it would be helpful to come and have an hour and a half of silent co-working time, you can come and join us. It's usually a tiny group. And I personally, even if it's only a tiny group, I'm going to keep doing these because I get so much done during that time. So you are always more than welcome to drop in at any point within those 90 minutes and take us up on some accountability. Also, while you are in Fruition, if you click around in that in circle where you joined to register for this event, you're going to find that there's all kinds of free classes available. We have a pitching class that's available. We have a networking for humans class that's available. We have all of the past workshops that we've done. The recordings of those are available. So there's a lot of resources available to you. And next month in March, we're going to have another one of these, which will be on search engine optimization. So if that is something that's interesting to you, you can come and join us for that. That will be with Mai-kee, who is a part of the community, and maybe you've even met Meg at one of our networking events. Okay, so the final thing that I will say before I introduce our expert contributor today is that this space is really meant to be a collaborative space, both to platform people who I really trust and have learned a lot from, and also to provide free programming to you all. And one of the things that really helps us is when you tell people about what we have going on, because we pay all of our speakers. And I think that that's really important. And in order for it to be sustainable, we need new people coming through the door because it's part of our business model. So I'm just going to be upfront about that. Please, if you see something that looks like it would be really helpful to your friends, tell them and encourage them to join us if you feel like this was worth your time today and you wanted to be here. Okay. So we're going to be talking about sustainable visibility today. I'm going to pass things off to Mai-kee Tsang, our host for the day, in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to tell you a bit about why I invited Mai-kee to do this session. I found Mai-kee's work through some people who I really trust and know have a lot of integrity in the business development space. We have known each other. I don't even remember the first time that we connected, but it was years ago at this point, I think. And I've watched the way that Mai-kee has operated, and I have seen the integrity. And what I appreciate so much about Mai-kee's work is that she's not just talking about pitching and getting yourself in front of people, but she's really acknowledging the different experiences that different people have during that process and the very real effect that it has on us as people who are constantly going out of our comfort zone. It comes with risk. And I am really appreciative of the fact that we have somebody who can both help us get in front of more people. Thank you, Tristan. And also honor the humanity. So very excited to pass things off. Mai-kee, take it away.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this book, and to everyone who's shown up here live, and to all of you who are watching the recording. I have not forgotten you. So I am super, super excited to be here today to create this fruition-based workshop around sustainable visibility, which is something that I founded back in 2020, and I will just not stop. I will not shut up about it. It's so important in my experience, and just from experience of my community, how essential it is to really integrate safety in showing up. So I really hope that today, by the end of this workshop, you really walk away feeling grounded in yourself, that showing up can mean something completely different to you than it will someone else, and yet it still matters and it's very valid for you. So this entire workshop is about being safely seen, how to honor those intersections of your identity as you become more visible. Now, I do love setting expectations because you've taken your time here with me today, and I do not take that for granted. So here's what you can expect in this workshop. Number one, I'm going to share with you 3 questions that you can ask yourself to assess your current relationship with visibility. Because chances are you've shown up before and it may have been great for business, but then afterwards, like, oh, let me just hide under a rock for 3 months because that was just too much. Like, as someone who's been semi-viral before, it was my worst nightmare. So you so you might want to assess what your current relationship is with visibility, because I'm willing to bet that you don't struggle with being visible. The struggle actually comes from sustaining it, right? And so these 3 questions are things you might want to loop back to every now and then, just to see, how are things changing? What's stagnant, you know? So we've got that. I'm also going to be sharing with you the intentional identities exercise. Now, I do want to give a disclaimer that historically, as I have done this exercise in live communities like this before, this tends to be quite a tender part of the workshop. So you may at some point need to get up from your desk, take a little walk, grab a cup of tea, whatever you need, and I celebrate you for that, because it's quite a confrontational thing at times. It's also going to help you become more aware of what's most important to you. So I just want to give you a disclaimer there. That might happen. And it's okay if you need to turn off your camera, you need to walk away, come back, do whatever you need to, because this recording is going to be here for you. Okay? So we've got that. And I'm also going to be sharing with you how you can go about calculating your capacity to be visible. And this is my 3A model. And it's always helpful because capacity seems to be this big thing that's kind of hard to anchor. Right? And so I'm hoping that with these 3As and with the analogy, metaphor, simile, I always get those mixed up, but whatever that is, that it will help you ground yourself so that when you are choosing different ways to be visible, whether it's through SEO or podcast guesting or blogging, whatever that is, you'll be able to put it through these 3As and know, yeah, I have the capacity for that this season. So that's the hope. And of course, we will be wrapping up with a discussion time / Q&A, whatever you want to call it, because stuff like this, I wish it was something that you just kind of like action on and off you go. But I'll be honest, this is really introspective work. And hopefully it's going to be worth it for you in the long run, because it will sustain you when you understand this about yourself. So I'm not going to tell you the one particular method or strategy that works for every single person, because that does not exist. I will tell you what works for me and I'll break down why it works, but not to position the strategy as the end all be all, but more like, okay, what can I really understand about that and what can I take away from it? Right. So I'll be giving examples along the way. And this would hopefully be an interactive workshop as well. So there will be, so as I go through each of these sections, there will be a prompt where you can share in the chat if you want to. And because we are a lovely intimate room here today, we can also do the whole mute unmute thing. And there's one thing I want you to know, that you do not have to share anything. Okay, you can just witness, be present with yourself. That is just as valid. Okay, so there will be that invitation, and if no one takes me up on it, that's fine, we'll move on. There will be those prompts if you wanted to take that opportunity. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today. So before we get started, in case this is your first time meeting me, hi, my name is Mai-kee Tsang. I use she, her pronouns, and my official business title, as it were, is the Sustainable Visibility Mentor, the ICF certified trauma sensitive leadership coach, and podcast guesting strategy trainer. And in a nutshell, I help HSPs, which stands for highly sensitive people. So HSPs, introverts, empathic humans in business, to show up consistently for their clients and community without compromising their safety, their capacity, or values in the process, as well as their bottom line, FYI. And I feel that it's my responsibility to tell you that everything I share with you, please take it with a pinch of salt, because I'm willing to bet that no one in this room has identical identities from one person to the next, right? So for example, I'm a cisgendered person. I'm also someone who I was born in the UK, English is my first language. I am aware that I do have identities that are dominant in the grand scheme of things. And I'm also coming to you with a mix of marginalized identities as well. I'm of Asian descent. You wouldn't know this by looking at me, but I'm on the LGBTQIAP plus spectrum. And I know that acronym gets longer and longer. So apologies if I missed any out. That's like, I'm the P in that. Like, I'm the pansexual in there. But anyway, so I'm that. I'm also this. I'm also a trauma survivor. I'm also prone to anxiety, a lot of things. So please do again, take everything I say with a pinch of salt and just always think to yourself, what applies to me? Just take what resonates and leave behind what doesn't. Okay. Alrighty, we are good to go. All right, so I thought it would be helpful if I actually share with you the three aspects I look for in terms of when something is actually sustainably visible for me, right? For my business. And when you are looking through this list, when I'm sharing it with you, I want you to think for yourself, what's mine? What do I look for? What do I want? What do I need? Right? So these are the three aspects I personally look for whenever I'm trying out a new strategy. I think, does it fit the bill? One, I need strategies that honor my business model. So at this time and place, I have a combination of premium one-on-one services, and I also sell digital products, right? So I only need a small handful of one-on-one clients because of the price tag, right? It's very in-depth work around podcast guesting, positioning and messaging, pitch writing, all of that good stuff. So I only need a small handful of clients of that caliber every single year. And in between that, I love doing guest workshops like this. And I also sell digital products for podcast guesting, which is probably, you probably would have guessed that's my thing now, like podcast guesting in a sustainable way. And I also have a co-working membership. And I also have a $9 one all about cup of catch-ups and how to connect with your community in a consistent way without breaking your boundaries. So there's a lot of things that I do, right? But my primary business model, if I were to just really break it down simply, is okay, I have a mix of one-on-one services, need a small amount of people for that, and a digital products, which is more volume based. So that means that I do need to try out strategies that kind of like scratches the itch for both of those needs, right? I need like deep trust and also big reach, deep reach, right? So think to yourself, what is your business model, right? And what do you need? Do you need more volume or more depth of trust? Or both? Number two, I love doing business in a very people-led way. I love focusing on the depth of my relationships as opposed to how many people I know. I was not that kid in school that was popular by any means, but I've always had really wonderful, deep friendships that have lasted a really long time. Some of my best friends I've known for more than half my life. And it's because I love doing business that way. It's never been a transactional thing. And granted, you won't be besties with every single person you ever like come across and collaborate with. That's okay. But the point is that because of the fact I take care of my relationship best I can, case in point with Brooke and I, like we've known each other for years now. I believe it was 2021, Brooke, when we had that interview on your podcast for Transcend Your Dichotomy. And I remember you telling me that because of the trust and the word of people who you respect in the online space, like Tanya Geyser, for example, you saw their testimonials for me when I spoke in their communities, and you're like, oh, well, Tanya said so. Maybe I should really look into this Mai-kee person, right? And look, here we are, a couple of years later. And Brooke has been a part of my community. I've interviewed Brooke for one of my offers, all of that good stuff. So you can see it's not a transactional thing. And I love strategies where I can prioritize that. So for you again, when you look at your business model and how you like doing business, what do you need? And finally, I need strategies that help me show up in a way that honors my identities and my nervous system. I am a trauma survivor, and that has really, really affected how I show up. In fact, without going too into detail, I was re-triggered from something that literally made me want to hide for years. And I did hide for years. And that is because I was not careful or as selective as I should have been, because I was listening to someone else's advice that was telling me, hey, this worked for me, therefore it worked for you. But they didn't probably acknowledge or even understand, were aware of how they had unique privilege that I simply did not have. And I paid the price for it. So I'm hoping that by sharing this with you today, you really put your safety first. Safety first, strategy second. Okay, so now that I share these three aspects with you, think again to yourself. What is your business model? How do you like doing business? Which parts of your identity may you want to protect a bit more? We'll get a bit deeper into that later on. But now that I've shared these three aspects with you, now I'm going to share these three questions that help me really understand it and come up with these things. So it's almost like you coming up with your own sort of checklist, your own filters, like, oh, that's not going to be sustainable. Oh, I'll try that maybe when I have a bit more capacity, all that good stuff. So I figured out my personal definition. Now it's time for yours. So here are the three questions to help you assess your current relationship with visibility. And I don't want you to worry about scribbling, writing all this down. I'm gonna email Brooke like the slides, so you don't need to worry about that. Just if you are here live right now, especially, try to be present with yourself and just see what comes up. Okay. Number one, why do I want to be visible in my business? Simple question, but you'd be surprised like what can come up here. Why do you want it? Because we actually don't want visibility for the sake of being visible. We want what comes after it, right? It's the same thing with money. We don't actually want money just for the sake of having it. We want it for something, an experience, being able to pay our bills, putting food on the table. So for you, why do you actually want to be visible? That's the first question. Second question, what are my biggest blocks around being consistent with my visibility? Let me just say here that consistent doesn't mean constantly. You can be consistent without being constantly on, right? But what is that thing, that wall that you keep coming up against? That's the very reason why you keep falling off the bandwagon and chasing after it again to get back on it. We all have that. So what's yours? Next. How would I love to feel when I'm visible? These questions very much intersect because by answering these three, you'll be able to find that thing that is kind of like, wait, that doesn't match. What's happening here? Oh, that's the block. I say I want to be visible, but I'm not. And this is why. I don't know about you, but I would love to feel safe when I'm visible. Safe, welcome. It's actually why I love doing guest workshops. So when Brooke told me the kind of amazing people that were part of Fruition so far, I knew that I was going to be in a safe place to share this stuff, right? So what would you love? So that visibility feels easy, welcoming, something you look forward to. And I've actually got a bonus question. So technically it's 4 questions, but hey, just think about the bonus one. This one seems to help people look outside of themselves a bit. Because sometimes visibility can often feel like, oh gosh, all the pressure is on me, the spotlight's on me. Ah, my gosh, what are we going to do? But I'll tell you, this question might help you look outside a bit, on the outside looking in. Who am I representing as I'm being seen? sometimes in my own past, when visibility has felt like such an upward climb, such a struggle, I have actually been told directly from a couple of my fellow Asian entrepreneurs who aren't as far along in their journey. They're more on the beginner stages or they've just rebranded or something. And they tell me how hard it is for them to see themselves on the stages, showing up consistently. And they've actually thanked me and said, you know, Mai-kee, I don't see many people who look like us, but thank you for showing up the way you do, because at least that makes me feel like perhaps it's not impossible, but I can actually do it in my own way. So for each and every one of you who's here in this workshop right now, who's watching this as a recording, when it feels like it's too much, who are you also doing it for? So I'm going to pause right here, and this is going to be my invitation to ask if you're open to sharing at all. Feel free to pop your thoughts in the chat box. If you could type number one, like I'll do a demonstration, put one in the chat if you want to share, and put zero if you're good. Because that tells me like, oh, okay, I could, I need to wait for someone, or like, oh, okay, let's move on. Because sometimes when I've been in workshops as an attendee, when you're busy typing your answer, because you need to think and then type, and it's like, oh wait, they've already moved on. Wait, I wanted to say something. So that's why I use the 1 and 0 system. So type 0 if you're good to move forward, or type 1 if you want to say something or write something. Okay, we've got 0 in the chat. Anyone else? Okay, looks like we're pretty good to move on. Brooke, how about you?
I'm trying to decide if I personally don't feel like I need to share anything.
That's
I'm
fair.
trying to, so yeah, we can move on for me. But also,
All
I
right.
know that when I'm doing these things, I'm like, is anyone going to say anything?
I mean, who knows? We might save it entirely for the discussion at the end. There may not be any questions per se, but things come up later. It's all good. All right. So thank you very much for confirming this. It's all good. All good. All right. See, that's how the 1 and 0 system works. All right. Perfect. So now you probably have a bit of an idea now of your current relationship with visibility, what it's currently looking like, where you want it to go, what might stop you on the way there, zooming out, seeing the bigger picture. So let's see how your identities may be influencing this a little bit, if not a lot. Okay? So I'm going to have to share a hard truth, and a very necessary truth, in my opinion. Okay? Visibility without protection can cause you more harm than it can help you. And not all visibility opportunities are equal. That's why it's essential to show up with awareness of which identities are safer to share than others. Rick, Brooke gave me a indication that some of you have already been doing some identity work, which is amazing. And for those of you who are new to it, it's all good. I'm going to walk you through step by step. And let me just say, this is not a how to do it. It's an exercise that I've come up with a couple of years ago. And it always seems to really help activate, these creative juices like, oh, actually, what is safe for me to share? And not so much. Where may I need to be a bit more selective about where I show up to share whichever detail, right? Because like I said, in my own past, I was not as selective. I was simply following the advice of a mentor who wasn't aware of their own privileges. And the harm came, the consequences came. And now I know that, oh, okay, I don't share this out in the open. I share this detail in spaces like this. Okay, so hopefully it's going to give you a bit of an indication for that. So introducing the intentional identity exercise. Now, what's going to happen is on the next slide, you're going to see a handful of social identities, and I want you to pay close attention to the three that really seem to kind of jump out from the screen and you feel drawn to almost. And I will say, I am not the one who came up with this list. If anything, it's actually a deconstruction of the social identity wheel. And that is a model that has been redone so many times. I actually don't know the original creator, but let me just say that I chose not to provide a wheel because whenever our brain sees shapes, we try to fill in the blank, right? So say if there are 12 sections, you will try fill in those 12 sections. So instead, I'm like, no, do you know what? I'm just gonna like deconstruct it a little bit. So I popped all of these identities that have been on a wheel that I've looked at and pop them in different fonts. So don't pick it if you like the font, okay? Just the identity itself, right? Okay, so I'm going to show that picture now, and I'm going to give you a minute or two to see which three are coming to you. And I'll show you what to do with that next. Just have a look. Maybe it's the things that you're proud to stand by. Maybe they're the things that you can't help but show. Or maybe ones you feel like you need for people to know about you. And I give it about another 15 seconds or so. If you haven't come up with three, that's okay. Let's say 1 to 3 and see. And take a sip of water. Three, two, one. Okay. Now remember, I'm going to send these slides over to Brooke. So in case you want to do this exercise again in your own time, you absolutely can. Or if you're watching this as a recording, you can pause it right now and just see. And now I'm going to move on as to what to do or what's coming up for you, I guess, with the 1 to 3 that you feel gravitated towards. Taking that intersectional approach. Now that you have this 1 to 3 that you're most drawn to, it's time to answer these two important questions. Number one, when my slide loads, which identities do you want to actively represent and publicize when you're visible? And number two, which identities would you prefer to privatize if possible? Because there are some that you see when you look at someone. For example, I can't hide the fact that I'm Asian. My name says it, my face says it, hair color probably. You know, there are some things that you can't exactly privatize. Some you can though. I'm asking you to answer these questions for yourself because this could be the difference between what stories you choose to share, the degree of detail you go through, and when it's time to actually pull back on something because you're not entirely sure if the space you're in is going to accept you, welcome you. For example, when I actually look back on this slide, I remember an identity that I used to feel like I had to like stamp everywhere was the fact that I'm British born. Because I used to be a copywriter. I still use copywriting skills throughout my business, but I don't do it for people anymore unless it's in the context of podcast pitching writing. But I so remember that I used to feel like I had to emphasize the fact that I was British. Like, look, I know that my name, and like when you look at me, you'll maybe not be sure, but I can write fluent English. I used to have that fear, I remember. And it wasn't until I had someone on my podcast who talked about what it's like being an ethnic minority in business and how she was overlooked for projects because of the biases that people had towards her. I remember that all too well. But now I couldn't care less if someone knows I'm British or not. Like, yeah, I purposely sometimes, like, I love leaving typos. I mean, I love that I don't have to worry about that. That used to keep me up at night thinking, oh gosh, I actually made a typo and that email sent out. But now I don't care. I'm like, well, if you care that much, that's up to you. If that is enough reason for someone to unsubscribe or tell me how awful my English is, I'm like, you do you. I'm not going to cater to someone like that who tries to shame me for an honest mistake. But the fact is, in my past, I used to hide behind my citizenship, trying to think that that would be enough of a cover for the fact that I'm Asian. That was in, it was after Black Lives Matter, after the Atlanta incident in 2021, which caused such a huge, almost like worldwide heartbreak, especially for the Asian and Pacific Islander community. Broke my heart wide open. And ever since then, I've really kind of put my race at the forefront. And I've started talking about certain issues that I used to be so scared of. But the point being is that this is going to change for you. The three you choose today is probably going to be different from the three you choose next year. But the reason why I asked you to look at the ones you're gravitated towards now is because those are clearly the ones that mean the most to you right now. The ones you want to honor or the ones you want to keep safe or both. Right? So I'm going to put those questions up there again. Which ones do you actively want to represent and publicize? And which ones are you much better off safekeeping unless it's in the right community? This is my invitation for you now, for those of you who are live right now with me. If you're open to sharing anything at all, feel free to pop a 1 in the chat to let me know you either want to unmute yourself or that you're typing and you just need a bit of time to type. Or you can give me a 0, knowing that, do you know what, Mai-kee? I'm all right keeping this to myself and clearly something that I need to work through a bit more. Because like I said at the very beginning of this workshop, this exercise has historically always been the one that kind of catches people, makes them think. And it's not always a one and done thing. Sometimes you may find over the next couple of days or weeks even that little layers will start showing themselves. And you'll peel back the layers like an onion, one by one. Okay? So I'm just going to check the chat to see if there's anyone. All right. Okay. We got some zeros. I respect that. Thank you for letting me know. So on that note then, I'm just going to take a pause for everyone. I feel like I've almost been holding my breath. So even this exercise for me, even though right now I'm the one sharing it with you, it still brings up stuff, right? Hence why I invite you to be gentle with yourself. One more inhale and exhale. And we shall move on. Right. Now you have an idea, so you can see we're building up in layers, right? Now you have an idea of your current relationship with visibility based on those 3 questions, or 4 technically, that I shared with you, and which identities you're holding. Let's see how you might want to craft a more capacity-based approach to visibility moving forward. So it's not just about showing up, it's not just about following through with the strategy, but how do you sustain it in a way that really works with you? Because I consider myself as a spoonie. If you don't know what a spoonie is, look up spoon theory on Google. But any given day, my energy levels, they shift. I was actually born with a chronic condition, which really drastically affects my energy levels. And I don't really share that very openly because I don't ever want it to be like I'm making excuses, because it's not an excuse, it's a genuine explanation for how low my energy can go, right? I have various stresses, various conditions, many things that affect my ability to show up every day. So I diversify the way I show up. So when I'm in my lowest capacity state, I can still show up without breaching my boundaries, without leading to burnout. And that is what this next part is for, is so that you can really assess for yourself what works for me, what do I really enjoy, what works well for my business, what do I have the capacity for this season? Or if you don't know what you have the capacity for, maybe this model will help you assess what that is. So, on that note, here's how you can start calculating your capacity with the 3 A's. This is an airplane, okay? The reason why I'm sharing an airplane is because when we travel, like say, like my grandmother, she lives in Hong Kong, and a flight from the UK to Hong Kong is about 14 hours, right? So if I was on the phone with her, or she's quite hip actually, she's got WhatsApp. So if I said like, "Hey, Gran, I'm coming to Hong Kong," I would not say to her, "I'll see you in 14 hours," because that's the length of the flight, right? No, that would be wildly, wildly inaccurate because it's not just a flight I need to take care of. I need to book my tickets. I need to get to the airport, go for security, check in my bag, all of that stuff. Maybe have a meal if I don't fancy eating on the plane. And then when I've actually landed in Hong Kong, I need to collect my luggage. I need to get a taxi to her flat, all of that. So it's way beyond 14 hours. But why am I sharing that with you? Because I know for a fact, and I know this because of clients, peers, community members, anyone who I've ever spoken about this with, they miscalculate their capacity when they're visible. And this is why they burn out. Because they only think of the middle part, the actual thing. So I'll give you context afterwards, but basically they only take into account the 14 hours. They don't think about what's before and after. So that's why I'm going to get into the 3 A's, right? So the first A is the anticipation. So we're going to use the travel example, right? This is the booking the tickets. This is getting to the airport, right? It's everything you need to think of beforehand. So this is the preparation before the actual action takes place. And I promise it's going to make so much more sense with the examples, so bear with me. The second A is the action. And this is the time, the energy, and the other resource required for you to actually follow through with your commitment, right? And lastly, we've got the aftermath. And the aftermath is how the experience has impacted you. What was the results of the action? So let's give you a bit of context so that it can really, really solidify, right? So podcast guesting, right? I told you this is my jam, so I always use it for examples. But gosh, the amount of people who have come up to me and told me, Mai-kee, I'm going to do what you did, and I'm going to pitch like over 100 podcasts, because context. Back in 2019, I was that person. I pitched to 101 podcasters personally in 30 days, and I received a 33% booking rate. And I say that not as a tale of celebration, but as a tale of caution. Because while, of course, I was immensely, immensely grateful for the opportunity for all the people who said yes, you bet your honey buns that I burned out. Because that was like 33%. That's like over 30 hours of interviews in a short amount of time. And as much as I love connecting with people, I am an introvert. So that was a lot of social energy exchange that I couldn't take. So when people come up to me, they've heard my story and they want to do the same thing, I kind of stop them and I'm like, well, yes, you may have the time to do the interviews, but what about beforehand? Are you preparing yourself? Are you actually listening to the interviews? Because any client or customer of mine, they will not get away with like skipping those steps, right? Because I'm like, no, 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 don't be that person. Don't be that person who shows up not knowing what they're doing and try to wing it. Don't do that. Show up prepared. Honor the person who's allowed you on their platform, right? So yeah, they may have a lot of time for the interviews, but for the preparation beforehand and the aftermath of promoting, if they are willing to skip those two steps, they will not be a client of mine. And they're really missing the mark when it comes to podcast guesting. So if we take podcast guesting through the 3 A's, hopefully it's going to make more sense. So the anticipation stage of podcast guesting as a visibility strategy, right? This is the research. This is the pitching, the preparation to book the interview itself, right? This is when you're probably listening to a couple of things, refining your pitch, making sure that it's actually aligned with what they're looking for. That's all in the anticipation stage. The action. Again, the time, energy, and other resources to show up for this opportunity, to show up for your interview. So you might have a little routine. Like I have a dance routine that I personally get, and by routine, I don't mean like something choreographed. No, no, no. I can't choreograph. I will put on Megan Trainor's All About That Bass or Beyonce's Run the World just to feel empowered, and I will dance around my room like no one's watching because no one is. But the point is, on the actual interview day, there's still some preparation to do, right? Before you even turn on your microphone, before you turn on Zoom. And people only seem to focus on that, not the before and after. Which brings me to the aftermath. How did you feel after the interview? Was it smooth? Was it a bit rough around the edges? What about promoting it? How was it received? As a podcast host myself, I'm the host of the Quiet Rebels podcast that's been running for nearly 5 years now. I notice the difference between the guests that show up for me and the ones who duck out and run after the interview's been recorded. It ain't fun. And Brooke is like nodding her head and like, yeah, all podcasters share this pain. We've all had guests like that. And when we do, they've missed the mark for podcast guesting, which is the relationship that develops. Again, case in point with Brooke and I. So hopefully this example will give you an indication again, like, oh, actually, how much capacity have I set aside to not only do the thing, but everything before and after? I've had clients come to me to work with me to work on their stories because in the aftermath stage, they told a story that they didn't expect to tell, nor did they have any boundaries around how to tell it in a way that made them feel safe. They got what we call a vulnerability hangover when, like, oh, actually, in the moment it felt okay to share it, but actually, oh gosh, that detail, that story is out there for the world now. They don't think about it unless they work with me. But the point being that the point is there's so much more to the strategy when you actually consider the before and after. All right, so let me give you a couple more examples. So attending a conference as a speaker is not just about those 30 minutes, 60 minutes you're on stage. No, no, no. Likely you would have had some sort of coaching, some preparation on your signature talk, maybe buying an outfit for the stage, maybe, networking with people the night before. There's so many things. And then after the fact, you're probably tired from the travel and you need some time to recuperate, right? And like, oh, okay, so a lot of people love my talk. Great, got a lot of new email subscribers, but if there's no way to kind of support them after the fact, it's kind of like, ugh, you spent all your capacity on the action, not the aftermath or the anticipation, right? Our examples are like posting a reel that suddenly got a lot of traction. One of my peers did that. She also hated it. Like, going viral was not my visibility goal. And I'm like, yep, neither was mine. Sending out an email blast to your list that got a lot of responses that now require you to be in your inbox to actually respond and have those conversations. Every strategy requires, in my opinion, the consideration of the three A's: the anticipation, the action, and the aftermath, to ensure you actually have the capacity to sustain it. So, the next time you say yes to something, run it through the three A's. Carve out that time, carve out any support you might need during that, right? So the support I need when I'm doing workshops like this, I tell my partner, I'm like, hey, I literally take a screenshot of my schedule and I mark it red if it means shh, when you come into the house, shh, because she can be pretty loud. And like the cats can run a bit wild when my partner comes home, all of that's good stuff. Point being, I need a lot of things, right, in place for me to feel like, yeah, I can sustain this. And because I know Brooke, I knew that the anticipation side is significantly less, right? Because I've done this before. I have talked about sustainable visibility in a myriad of ways. And I know Brooke, I know the kind of community that she's cultivated. So that made me feel safe enough to kind of not skip past the anticipation, but I didn't have to spend too long in that stage. And I said at the beginning, when I was sharing a bit about my identities, I have a I have an anxious brain. I'm the kind of person who maps out 100 worst case scenarios and none of them happen, but I still spent that time and energy focusing on that. So for me, anticipation can often be a stage where I kind of stay for a while. That's why when I'm in an intimate space like this, because I'm being visible right now, right? I think about how much alignment do I have with the host and therefore their community by extension. In this case, it's a very high alignment point for me. So that's why, okay, I can move past the anticipation. The action in this case is very meta now. The action is me spending these 60 to 90 minutes with you all. And the aftermath is any time that I hopefully will be able to connect with a couple of you and, continue our chats, talking, forming a connection, if that is the case, right? So I know I've allocated my capacity in accordance to the three A's. So again, next time you run it, next time you say yes to something, run it through the three A's. So now it's your turn. Here's your kind of action piece for this section. If you were to pick your visibility strategy of choice, run it through the three A's and think, how much capacity does it actually take up for you? So if you're open to sharing, feel free to pop your thoughts in the chat. And while I'm waiting on that, we still do the 1 and 0. Brooke says, though Mai-kee posts some fire dance videos on the ground. Oh gosh, yesterday I did High School Musical 3. It was their prom one. If anyone's ever watched that movie, it was so fun. It was like the disco. It was like the disco. It was fantastic. Anyway, point being, if you do follow me on Instagram, you might be able to catch a view of one of those dance videos. I don't always share them, but the ones where I feel are appropriate to share, I will post them every now and then. And I think I have a reel on my Instagram somewhere about that. All right, we have a one from Sophia. So Sophia, if you'd like to unmute yourself, please feel free to. And yeah.
I don't know if I'm doing this correctly, but I noticed that when I used to do my podcast regularly, the anticipation was fine, the production of the episode was fine, but I was wiped out by the time I was done with recording. And I had zero energy to promote visibly or invisibly at all. So much so that I took like a 4-year break from it. And still have not been able to kind of quote unquote get in gear even though I have a million ideas and a million topics and things that I could record, but I find that with also other things when I create a product or, I've had physical products. And so when I make the physical products, then I make the products. I love the creating, but I don't have the capacity to promote them, nor do I enjoy promoting them. I like talking about them, but promoting them and getting them to be visible or getting myself to be visible, I think it's the way that I'm visible in which I get tired. Talking about something for me is pretty easy, but the internet stuff of it all is where I really get stuck. So I would say for me, the the visibility strategy, I need to work on the third step, which I don't remember what did I say? It's
The aftermath.
aftermath. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you
It's
for sharing, Sophia. And
yeah.
sorry, was there something else that you'd like to share?
No, I was just gonna say, I don't know if that I
Okay,
said
there's
it
no right or
correct.
wrong. There's no
Yeah,
right
no,
or
I
wrong.
know. I mean, did I answer the prompt or is like, yeah. But that's what just keeps coming up is the anticipation is, emailing a podcast guest and getting them and the scheduling.
Mhm.
That part's not like the funnest, but I already know when I'm asking them to be a guest or when I'm recording for a solo episode, I already know what the podcast is going to be. I have the whole thing in my head, but it's
Mm.
I would say that part is a little bit less tricky than the aftermath, but it's still a little, but then the middle part is the juiciest part for me. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, thank you. This is really helpful.
Thank you too. And I think what you shared actually is really important to acknowledge that there are going to be different things that you feel more drawn to. Like I actually know from a human design perspective, I'm a manifester, and one of my open centers, or the ones that I really define are my throat. So actually, when I speak, is actually one of my favorite ways to do things because I'm a verbal processor, right? So therefore, podcasting makes sense. Podcast guesting also makes sense to me. But I will tell you this now. When I'm in a low capacity season, I don't want to speak. I actually find a lot of joy and results in my business as well when I write. And that's why towards the end, when I share like different ways to connect with me, when I'm in a low capacity season, especially, you'll be hearing from me a lot more on my email list than you will on my podcast. It just means that I'm just honoring the season. So, Sophia,
I'm a
for you,
manifester too.
hey, here we go.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
might
I
be
get
another
that.
thing to take into account, actually, your human design. And for anyone who's not in human design, you might be your Enneagram, what your 16 personalities, whatever it is, that might give you some insight as to what you can sustain and what things you might want to hold back on a little bit more. But when I said writing, right, I really struggle with blogging, right? And the whole SEO part. So writing is not just, again, one all be all, it's very much the context of the writing. It's on my turf if it's email, but when it's SEO stuff, I know I can't just write whatever I want to. I need to be strategic with keywords and all of that stuff, and that takes up too much capacity. So I'm like, okay, not yet, but I know I need to.
This is kind of like a sandwich. It's like you have to slice, get the bread if it's sliced, but you're wanting to enjoy the contents of the sandwich, but you have to like get the bread, put it on top, get the bread, put it on
So
bottom.
secure, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you
I mean,
again.
open face sandwiches are great too, but I had a toasty yesterday. It was
Yes, they
fantastic.
are.
Cheese
Yes,
was
they are.
melty in the middle. It's great. Or maybe next time I'll use that as a sandwich. Thank you for that idea. But thank you, Sophia. All right, we have Brooke.
Yeah,
Hey.
thank you for this. Oh, hi Tristan. As I was going through this, what I'm realizing is that anytime that I get an opportunity on a podcast that I've really wanted for a long time, it is so predictable that at the end, when it's over, I am convinced that I blew it. Like, it's I never do in my activated probably like nervous system at that time. It never feels like I did a quote good enough job, and I always feel like I blew it. And what I'm noticing here is that actually I'm not taking care of that in the aftermath. I'm just kind of like, oh, it's going to happen, but just like whatever. But if I took care of it, then I would be much more likely to go back and listen to it and promote it more and maintain more of a relationship with that person, because I would have felt like it went well and I offered something of value. Like, and I could probably do fewer guest spots. You know what I mean? Like if I was leveraging them a bit better, and I think I sabotaged that part by not taking care of the thing that I know always happens for me at the end. So, yeah, just like a helpful kind of takeaway. I appreciate.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think for those of us who have been on podcasts and, we take that strategy, that is the case a lot of the time. And I have a lot of peers who like I've never worked with, but they're like, oh, I don't actually want to promote that episode now because of what they shared. And they're not taking care of themselves in terms of the aftermath as well. So, any of the stages can trip you up, right? But thank you for sharing your reflection, Brooke. And something I did want to share on top of what Sophia was sharing was sometimes when it comes like getting back into gear, like I believe with the language you used or they used, sorry, Sophia, I don't know your pronouns, but I was going to say, what can be really important is actually understanding your cadence of consistency, right? And actually, Brooke, I need to send you the link to my blog post, which I'd love to pop in the notes along with the slides, because I have one a bit deeper about the consistency side of things. But sometimes, like I'm a podcaster myself, I used to do it every week, but then I felt like I got burnt out from the content. I felt like I was on a content wheel now. And I felt like I wasn't honoring my guests anymore. I felt like they're just filling in a slot. And I did not like feeling that way because it goes against my way of doing business, which is not doing it transactionally. Right. So what I did, this is a very, I'm not saying to do this, but I'm just saying take into consideration why I've done it, right? So instead of every week, I used to do every 2 weeks, and now I have an intuitive release schedule. And that means I release whenever I want to, whenever I feel that it's the most potent when I want to promote, right? Because I feel I really do justice by my guests that way. And I don't feel that guilt anymore. And I don't feel like I need to keep churning for the sake of churning. And I also know, by the way, that podcasting, so hosting my own podcast, it's not a lead generator. It's more of it creates more loyalty with people already in my space. So I know the purpose of that visibility strategy, because you might need to be more visible to either deepen the trust that's already there or to earn new trust from people who don't know you yet. It can be a bit of both, of course, but I know historically from my stats, from hearing back from my community, the people who listen to my podcast aren't really new people. They're actually people who stay in my space for years. So that's why I feel like I can afford to change the cadence of my consistency with my podcast, but I still choose to guest on more podcasts, more aligned podcasts to meet new people. Hope that makes sense. Right. So I see Becky, if you'd still like to share.
I've lost some of what I was going to say since the conversation has continued. But one of the things that was so very valuable about thinking about this with the 3 A's, and what I'm going to think about more, is that the anticipation and the action for me, well, kind of what Sophia was saying, are fine, easy, let's do this. And then it's the aftermath that it's all gone by then. It really is. And so apparently I need to rethink some of the action and the anticipation, because maybe it is more draining than I think it is. Or maybe some of the ways that I expect myself to show up after in the aftermath stage are not reasonable or sustainable. Perhaps I can let go of some of those expectations. What I most love to do for visibility with action is networking events. I'm in the event industry here in Seattle, so it's hyper local and it's extremely active. All of our marketing pretty much is done in person. And I adore that. That's how I operate as well. And so the more relationships I can build and the more time I get one-on-one and in community with people, the happier I am with that. But after every time I'm with another, person or in group or something like that, it's the follow-up after that that actually then sort of in my mind translates to actual sales, revenue, money. It's all the stuff that comes after. And that's the stuff I don't want to do. I just want to be present with people. And so this has been good. I need to rethink how I'm expecting myself to show up afterwards.
Oh, you are not alone at all, because I remember I went to my first conference since COVID last summer. It was great, met a lot of people, but I learned very quickly there I have such a thing as sensory overwhelm. And I had met someone who was the same as me, and we were like discovering it for the first time together. And we're like, hang on, do you have AirPods? And I was like, yeah, I've got AirPods. And like we both fished it out from our bags. And then we put them in, put on the soundproofing. Suddenly, the outside stimuli started to kind of like fade away, and then we can actually focus on our conversation. But it took me weeks to recover from that. And that just goes to show, as effective as it is for my business in terms of new business relationships and, potential clients, all of that good stuff, as effective as that is, it's not efficient for me energetically to do them too much. So that's when I know, okay, a visibility strategy, whether it's being a speaker or being a very, very active attendee, I know I can't do that very much in a year. Right? So it's things that you all might want to think about. What is effective for business and what's energetically efficient for you to keep doing it? Because that will determine your cadence of how often you do that. Right? So it's going to be a mix and match. It's not going to be one and done. Your strategy is always going to change. It's going to shift with your seasons of capacity, because life happens. So by having this awareness for yourself, okay, 3 A's: anticipation, action, aftermath. How is that faring so far with strategy A, strategy B, strategy C? Which ones can I kind of lean into more? Which ones may I need to retreat from because I just can't do it all right now? Right? It's important to know, but thank you for sharing your reflections so far. And yeah, all right. So I don't see any further ones, but there's time in discussion. So I'll check on time in just a bit. But we actually are approaching the end stages of today's workshop before we go into that Q&A/discussion section. So here are my suggested integration steps. I say suggested because I don't like telling people what to do, because I hate being told what to do. Manifestor in me, and maybe just like a rebel. And I probably didn't make my parents' lives easier, especially my mom. She didn't like the fact that I didn't like being told what to do. So that's why these are suggested, just things that you might want to work on. Okay. So number one is just going to reflect back what I've already told you. The 3 questions, or technically 4 in this case, to assess your current relationship with visibility. The 3 current dominant identities that you seem the most gravitated towards to either protect or project. Oh, that's going to be a new thing, project or protect. I'm always coming up with ideas, don't mind me. And finally, assess your 3 A's as you run at least 3 strategies through it to see, okay, how's my anticipation for this? How's my action? How's my aftermath? Some things are going to require bigger than others. My anticipation is huge when it comes for new things. So I recently ran my first digital event. I called it a not quite a summit thingamabob, right? And it was all about sustainable visibility. Because I hadn't done it before, almost my entire capacity was based on the anticipation, because it was all new. I had to create everything from scratch. The action, because I knew I had to run through it, I knew that I couldn't spend all of my capacity on the anticipation stage. I actually had to run it, right? Which was earlier this month. And the aftermath is now. I made sure that I had a week break straight afterwards, and I did. So this is me thinking ahead. Okay, I don't know what's coming, but I know I need a rest. Therefore, I'm going to block out a week, which happens to be on Valentine's week in this case, this year. But yeah, assess your 3 A's as you go through like a multitude of strategies to see what patterns are coming up for you. And that will really inform your own pathway to sustainable visibility. So, my lovelies, before we get into discussion and Q&A, if you would like to stay connected, I will send these links over to Brooke, so you don't need to worry about it now, but you can peek behind the curtain of my own business and sustainable visibility journey on my email list. So you can go to maikeethang.com/inside insights. And I actually use the sandwich structure to I actually set the expectation of how often you can expect to hear from me. And actually, when Sophia said a sandwich earlier, I actually call it the sandwich structure. And it's an open face sandwich in the sense that there's structure at the beginning of each month, but the rest is organic, like an organic filling. So yeah, that is my email list. So you'll hear from me the most there. Is also where you be the first to know any pop-up offers, any special events I'm doing, all of that good stuff, right? It's your best place to find me, if I'm quite honest. And then you can also check out my website, maikeethang.com. If you're the type to like scavenger hunts, then I do have an Easter egg hunt that starts on the homepage if you're so interested. And of course, the best social media platform to reach me on is Instagram. Now, heads up, I have a static 9 grid. That's also a part of my sustainable visibility strategy test, right? I have a static 9 grid. So it looks like I'm not on there much, but I'm in my stories quite often and I am in my DMs. So send me a DM and we can get chatting. Okay. So that is that. Those are the places to find me. I'll send all of those links over to Brooke, so you don't need to worry about finding them now. It will be hopefully by the slides or wherever this replay will be provided. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and say, let's get into the Q&A/discussion. So we are a lovely intimate group here today. So I guess we can do the whole unmute thing or the chat thing. Anyone who wants to unmute, feel free. But yeah. We are good.
Yeah, and I just also want to say that, so I know we lost a couple of people who had to leave at the hour mark. So we'll probably have like fewer people asking questions. And if you have a question or something that you want to discuss and you would prefer that it not be recorded, I am more than happy to pause the recording. So just if that's something that's important to you, just make sure to let me know and we can absolutely do that.
Question.
Didn't mean to do that. Hi.
Okay.
Sophia, would you like your question or reflection recorded or?
It doesn't matter. It's fine. I wanted to ask you about your podcast frequency. So you said, so I felt a lot of shame around it not being consistent so much that it feels like it's an afterthought, right? I haven't podcasted regularly since I started it, right? When you say that you publish intuitively or whatever the term you used was, you just put it out there and 3 months may go by or 3 weeks go by. Like, can you talk me through that a little bit?
Sure.
Because it feels like you're giving me permission to accept the way that I need to be doing this so that it'll allow me to do it. Because what it's been happening is it's this thing that I want to do that is looming over that and then I don't have the capacity to do what I know it's going to entail. And then I just don't do it.
Yeah. The perfection paralysis, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, I can't give you permission. I can only give you an insight and you give yourself permission of what you choose to do.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also this method is also something that I do want you to take with a pinch of salt, because again, it depends on what your podcast does for you. What does it do for your business? Because if you are using it for a very specific reason that's different from mine, then it may require you to choose a different cadence. But I'll just share what I did. Okay. So again, I first did my research to know who's listening. And I know they are people who already know me. Therefore, they are already aware of the fact that I long unsubscribed from feeling like I had to constantly be on. I even did an Instagram live a couple years ago. I said, I'm unsubscribing from the urgency culture because I'm just not about that. I do not want to uphold that. And here's what I'm doing. And so what I always do, which may be helpful for you, is to inform people, especially you said you're a manifestor, right? Right. So for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, manifesto is a type of, is an energy type of human design. And one of the best things we can do is informing people, letting people know ahead of time, setting expectations, sharing your boundaries. So in this case, it's like, hey guys, or not guys, hey everyone, hey folks, whatever you want to use. I am now posting on my podcast intuitively. That means you won't find a weekly schedule. And the reason for that is because I really want to do right by the content I provide you. I really want to honor my guests who come onto my show. And I can't do that on a time frame that's not my own. I'm going to share when it's really potent, it's really juicy, and I know it's going to be super valuable for you. So I hope to invite you along for the journey as I now have an intuitive release schedule for my podcast. That's what it is. And for me, again, because I know that my people stay, they love that I'm not always bombarding them with new stuff. They're busy enough as it is. I have people who have told me they love reading my emails. They even have a little tag for me in their Gmail, and they put my emails in there so they can read them like a good storybook or something. I have been told that more than once. Quite a few people do that. And that tells me they will, like the people who are really meant to be your people, Sophia, they will wait for you. They will be okay that you're not constantly on. If anything, by kind of like acknowledging this, you might help them give themselves permission to do the same thing. Kind of like, oh, wait, I don't have to do it constantly, but when I do, it's intentional. And that's also what I'm known for. My peers who are way further ahead than me in business, they know they can count on me for that. So even if they've never directly worked with me, they will still advocate for me. Because whenever I show up, even if it's not constant, it's consistently intentional.
You're following the urges.
Following the creative urges, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so
So-
much.
You're welcome. And I hope that if an intuitive release schedule is something that you want to try, I hope that it works out for you. If not, you can always do seasonal things with your podcast. You can do pop-up podcast episodes, whatever it is. But it's your podcast, it's your platform. Do with it what you will. And just record the results and just loop back another time and see what you might need to change or keep.
Thank you so much. This is so helpful.
Welcome. All right. Would anyone else like to share? You're more than welcome to type 1 in the chat if you want to write something, or you can just unmute yourself. And Brooke, you are involved in this too. So I always like to, I always feel like sometimes the host is like, oh, I'm holding this space for everyone. I'm like, no. Host is a part of this too. So feel free if you want to. But I'm just gonna sip my water until something happens. Also type 0 in the chat if you're good. So at least I know that you don't want to share anything, and it's okay.
So my question, it's forming as I'm asking it. So we might find out together what my question is. Because you focus on podcast guesting, I'm curious because as I'm looking at my visibility strategy and the 3 A's, and I'm noticing, right? So there's the aftermath that I shared, which is more than I usually account for, but also as you alluded to, the anticipation of getting on podcasts it's a lot of work. And especially for the way that and I think you as well, Mai-kee, do things. I'm usually like I don't really send many pitches. I'm usually just building relationships with people and like, right, that's kind of where the opportunities come from. I'm sorry, there's 2 really cute dogs walking by and I can't not. It's like a thing in me that I can't not
I'm
say
the same
it. I
with
wish
cats.
that
I'm the same with
see
cats,
them.
don't worry.
Oh my gosh. The benefits of living in downtown Los Angeles, like so many dogs. Anyways, so as I'm noticing like the amount of capacity that it does take to get those, I'm curious, like, I guess I'm curious about like examples of what kinds of like shifts you might make in a podcast guesting strategy to like kind of make it more, to make it fit your capacity more. And obviously part of it, right, is like this, not just sending out a bunch of cold pitches because that's going to take a whole bunch of work and it's not going to create the safety. But I'm wondering if there's anything else in there that, I don't know, would be that immediately comes to mind for you as kind of like things that people might shift to yeah, I think that's my question.
I think what comes to mind immediately is, when do you intend to harvest? In terms of what is it that you're actually looking for out of podcast guesting?
Uh-huh.
Because for a lot of people, it's how many they can get on and therefore how many they can brag about, right? And don't get me wrong, it is great. It is great positioning because I have a Spotify playlist on my press page. So the fact that you can scroll to see how many episodes I've been on, it is a great positioner. However, that is not what I'm looking to harvest. And that sounds awful actually now that I think about it. I'm thinking of like vegetables and things. But the point is that you need to ask yourself what is it actually you're looking for and when do you need it by? Because that will kind of like assess the degree of urgency that you are doing this from. Like for me, at the time when I did the 101 pitch challenge, I was in an urgent situation. I didn't have any clients. I needed to focus on my positioning, all of that stuff. But now I'm like, okay, I'm thinking bigger. I'm thinking beyond the interview. I'm thinking, where can this relationship go? Right? Am I looking for a potential affiliate partner? Am I thinking like there's something actually big we can collaborate on a project? Could we work with each other? That's what I'm looking for. And I know those things are a bit more longer haul. So I think for you, you need to assess for yourself, where does podcast guesting fit in with your overall business? Is it more of a relationship builder or are you actually using it as a means to something? Does that land at all?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that what I'm hearing in what you're saying, kind of what I'm taking away from it, or what's getting my gears turning, is thinking about how I can be really intentional about what the audience is for the podcasts that I am putting the effort into getting on. Because for me, I have found that one of the best ways that for people to find me is through podcast interviews. A lot of people have found me through podcast interviews because it's a longer form. There's more space for nuance and there's more space for context, and that's what I'm all about. So a place where I can really talk that through. I reach more people who get it and who are interested in having those kinds of conversations. So I think that what I'm hearing from you is like, okay, great, but like maybe it means fewer that are just really, really intentionally aligned. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you kind of
Thank you.
answered your own question. I've just kind of like been a mirror, just reflecting back at you.
Well, always. That's what we
but
do, right?
the fact, yes, it is. But the fact that you know that your ideal people do come from podcasts is already a big like check mark. It's like, yes, that's good to know that it's actually working for me because I've done bundles, for example, and while those have been one of the most significant list builders, but I'll tell you, the I feel like there's a lot less of a relationship with people who come from a bundle versus someone who comes from a workshop like this or comes from a podcast interview where there is room for more nuance. I'm not just one of many faces in something. And I think that's the beauty of podcast guesting because it's solely focused on you as a guest. And if you were to kind of like, now, because you reflected earlier about your aftermath not being quite taken care of yet, that tells me again that more is not going to help you. It's the depth that's going to help you more. It's like, okay, being very selective, very intentional, the people who you collaborate with, take care of your aftermath part, continue building that relationship because you can be invited on again to their podcast. They can recommend you to other people. So it's kind of like the things that happen beneath the surface can be extremely fruitful for you. So
Yeah. Thank
yeah,
you.
you're welcome. All right, so I saw a couple of zeros in the chat, so thank you for letting me know. So Becky, I'm just gonna like tap on your shoulder. Is there anything there? And Patricia, if there's anything, like feel free to let me know. Otherwise, we'll come to a conscious close in just a moment. You're good, Becky? Okay, fantastic, thank you. And Patricia, I'm not sure if you're there with us live right now as we can't see your lovely face, but I'm just gonna pause for a second. One last call, whether it's a question or reflection. Yeah.
My guess is if we're not hearing from Patricia right now, that she has been pulled away by children because
Okay.
if she was here, she'd be right on it.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much. All right. I guess in that note, unless anyone wants to go again, I believe we've come to a close for this workshop. Thank you so much, Brooke, for everyone who showed up live, who's watching this as a recording. thank you so, so much for being here at the part of this. And I really hope it will be the start, if not continuation, of your own journey towards sustainable visibility. And I'm going to share those. I'm just going to copy and paste those links for anyone who's here live and just like would fancy to kind of like click on those links. And again, I'll be sending the slides over to Brooke along with the links and the blog, the only blog I think that I actually have on my website, the only blog post. But yeah, those are my links. Sorry, they're not clickable. You might need to copy and paste that in case anybody wants to. But I really, 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 really hope that this helped you give yourself permission to show up in a way that feels safe for you and still strategic for your business.
Thank you so much, Mai-kee. This was fantastic. Everybody who came, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to be posting the replay of this in the workshops and Q&A section in our Circle community. So you can find this there. It will likely be up tomorrow, as well as all the other past workshops and Q&As that we've done. Make sure while you're in there to check out the community events section. Everything in there is free. So co-workings that are coming up, different events that we have going on, you can go ahead and RSVP to any of those that you would like to attend, and you'll get friendly little reminders. However it is that you set that up to be reminded. And yeah, it was lovely to see all of you. Mai-kee, thanks again. And I hope that also some of you go and find Mai-kee's podcast, Quiet Rebels podcast, because as we were talking about this, intuitive release schedule, which I know Sophia was very excited to hear about, I was excited to hear about. I think it's important that we have examples of people who are doing things in a way that feels like it's like, quote, not allowed. And so one of the main reasons why I have started Fruition is I want to give you examples of people who are doing things differently, so that can be reflected back to you and you can see that it actually is okay and possible for you to honor yourself. So engagement after the fact can go a long way, even if it's just for an example of another person who is out there like doing their thing in a way that's actually sustainable. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. See you all soon.
Take care. Bye for now. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to stay on. Should we stop the recording?